Good evening, everybody. I'm Cherri Gregg, and this is Real Talk with Cherri. I just want to give a quick shout out and say hello to everybody for being a part of this discussion. It is Blackout Tuesday. So I'm going to give y'all a second to get it together and get into the live and come chat with us. I know on Blackout Tuesday, everybody kind of was supposed to disconnect from social media, do something black as hell, right? Raise your consciousness. And that is what we plan to do tonight. So please tag a friend and share this video. The purpose of tonight is to have an integrated discussion about race. People have been protesting in the streets for the past several days. There has been looting. I've been on the front lines of this. There has been, but at the same time, there has been peaceful protests. There have been kneeling between police and protesters. There has been tweets. There have been comments. We heard the president speak. It is unlike anything we've ever seen right now. And it is time for a conversation. So for Blackout Tuesday, we're going to do just that. Black people, get your white friends, tag your black friends, anybody not black. This is something for everybody. So tag a friend, share this video, because it's time for us to have a collective conversation about race. This country was founded on racism. It was founded on white supremacy. It was rooted deeply in slavery. It's our original sin. And it's something that we continue to sweep under the rug. But now, all that muck is coming up and it's biting us right now. We see kids looting. We see, people agitating in the streets. We see vigilantes going after certain types of people. I mean, it's mayhem. It's mayhem. It's saddening. It's scary. And I think it's the way we can control something is to broaden our own minds. And part of that is to desegregate the conversation on race. So I want y'all to tag a friend, share this video. And I want to say hey to a couple people before I invite our two guests today. They're going to help me do that. They're going to help us do that. And guess what? You guys get to ask questions. I will give them to our guests. And the purpose of this is to educate ourselves, educate our friends. How many of y'all, for my black people here, how many of y'all have friends that are close friends who you love of other races? And how many times has a racial issue come up and that relationship got somewhat awkward? You didn't know what to say. They didn't know what to say. But we're going to give you some tools to work through all of that tonight. Hey, Angie. Thank you for bringing your friends. Hey, Philly Vibes. Chris, what's up? Hey, Hania. Hello, Charlotte. Thank you so much for being here. Hey, Catherine. Thank you so much for being here. Melissa's mom is in here. I love it. I gotta tell. So let me just take you back a couple of years. And I hope y'all remember 2018. I think it was in April. This video went viral. And I'm going to pull up the image for you guys because we remember this. This happened right in Philadelphia. It took us national, right? And two black men were in the Starbucks right on the edge of Rittenhouse Square. You remember them? Rashawn Nelson, Dante Robinson arrested. They were in the Starbucks just waiting on a friend. And like many of us, they don't always buy something. They didn't buy something right away. They asked to use the bathroom. All kinds of ish went out the door. And two ladies, right? One lady actually videotaped the whole scenario. Why? Police were called. They came in, handcuffed these two men, these black men in this ritzy part of town, carted them off, humiliated them, and started a firestorm. But it wasn't just a video. It was the sharing of the video. And it went viral in large part because it was shared outside of normal circles. And people were so outraged. And so these two ladies were involved in helping that video go viral. And also in desegregating this conversation on race. Today we have with us Melissa DePino and Michelle Saahene. I want to welcome these two ladies to Real Talk with Cherri and switch this up a little bit. Wait. No, there we go. Ladies, welcome to Real Talk with Cherri.
Hey.
Hi.
How are you two doing?
Doing well.
Yeah, good.
You know what? We didn't plan this. We're both wearing the same shade of purple and our hoops.
We've been hanging around together way too much.
That's kind of cool, though. That's really cool. And I see we have colorful pillows, Michelle, in the background. Melissa, I love everything you have. It looks like a little painting behind you. I love it.
We're trying.
I love it. And so it's just, and I was telling these ladies before they brought in that it's kismet, that we kind of had agreed to have a chat today, which turned out to be Blackout Tuesday, and to be in the middle of riots and protests across our country following the tragic death of a Black man at the hands of police. First, before we go into our conversation, I want each of you just to give reaction to what you're seeing every single day for the past several days.
Melissa, go ahead. You were there. You went to.
Well, I'm in LA right now. I've been here for a couple months now, and I was over at the demonstration. There was a beautiful protest organized by Black Lives Matter LA, and there were tens of thousands of people like peacefully marching and signs, and it was beautiful. It was multiracial. It was all different ages, and then all of a sudden, I was at a pretty well-known intersection in LA at 3rd and Fairfax, which is right by the Grove, and police came, and about 8 police vehicles just pulled up with riot gear, and they formed a barricade. They wouldn't let people pass. They were pushing them with nightsticks. They were shooting rubber bullets. They were the aggressors in a peaceful protest. And it's I want to make sure that message, I keep seeing that people talking about that in the news. I want to make sure that message gets out there, that for a protest that is protesting police violence, police are acting violent. So we're seeing a lot out here in LA, and I know Michelle's over in Philly. So
yeah, I saw some people marching today. It was beautiful. I would say probably about 75% white people were marching for Black Lives Matter. It was absolutely beautiful. It was beautiful. The one thing that I'm seeing that I think is, I mean, to be honest, I'm just disturbed by it, is the way that the police are still responding to kneeling protesters, whether they're responding to people coming together in solidarity. People aren't coming out with weapons. They're not meeting the police with AK-47s like, you know, these drones of white people were doing weeks ago when they wanted the country open back up because they wanted haircuts and wanted to go get their nails done. These men were in full gear with their AK-47s, and they were able to scream in cops' faces, and the cops didn't flinch. They didn't make a move. Nothing happened. A few weeks later, we see peaceful protesters kneeling with no weapons on them, and they're being shot in the face with rubber bullets. And I think it just goes to show that, you know, I think people need to understand that the reason that these cops were able to get away with what they were doing for so long, and the reason that they protected you, is because your silence was co-signing off of what they were doing. Now that you're no longer silent, they don't see you as their friend anymore. They don't see the need to protect you anymore. I want people to really, you know, understand that, because I'm sure there are a lot of white people going out to these protests not having any clue or thinking at all that they're going to be met with police violence. Yeah. You're just a little teeny tiny snippet of what it's like to be in a Black body and seen as an immediate threat. So,
yeah. And so this is a discussion on race, everybody, an integrated discussion on race. Black people, tag your white friends, bring your Black friends. This is all about talking about how do we blend the discussion. And first of all, you guys did that very well in 2018. You brought it together. Why in the world is this discussion? And I know I talk to my friends all about it, but we're each talking to each other. Why do we have a conversation about race that is traditionally so separate? And why do you think that? And Michelle, you can start, or Melissa, whoever wants to go first.
It's interesting because before I even knew that there was a study, Melissa found this study that actually talks about how our social media is very segregated, just like our real lives are. But it's interesting because I feel like I knew that without the statistics years and years ago. If I would see someone that made a really problematic comment or a racist comment, I would immediately go to their friend list and I would scroll and I would look and I'd be like, they're making that comment because they don't have any Black or brown friends. So they feel very safe and comfortable saying what they're saying. But then Melissa found this actual study that said that our social media is very segregated. If you're white, it's likely that your network is 91% white. If you're Black, it's likely 88% Black. And so the stories that, Cherri, you and I see every single day are white people are seeing every single day, because it's likely that we are probably their 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 Black friends in their entire network. And so they're literally not seeing the stories that we're seeing. And because it translates to real life, their real life is segregated. So they're not only are they not seeing the stories, they're not seeing it, they're claiming they don't see it in real life either. And that is why we have to integrate those networks so people can see what we are living every single day.
So we're seeing these videos, we're seeing all these stories. And so I want to go back to 2018. Melissa, when you shared that Starbucks video, why was that an important moment?
Well, one of the things is, up until I think like a week ago, there were no white people speaking up publicly about racism. And I'm going to say no, there were none, in that there were only a few. At the time when that happened, I was like searching the internet and looking, who was using their public platform to speak up against racism. And honestly, I found a couple of NBA coaches, Steve Kerr and Pop. And there's Matt McGorry, who's a white actor who speaks up. But it's very rare to see a white influencer speak up against racism publicly. There's lots of reasons for that. We can go into that later. So it was really important when I shared it, not just because it broke through those segregated networks, but because if Michelle had shared it, honestly, she wouldn't have been heard or believed. And that's the whole paradox of this, is that when I amplified Michelle's voice, people heard her and believed her, that's the problem. We should be believing Black voices without them coming through a white person amplifying them. But when you use your privilege to amplify Black voices, then they get heard. So that's part of what we want people to do.
Yeah. And this is a safe space, by the way, and you guys can post comments and questions here, and I will present them to Michelle and Melissa, because that is a critical point. Because and Michelle, we get triggered all the time, right? We're seeing videos, and I was thinking about how many videos I see, all these stories in my timeline. Even with the COVID-19, it seemed like everybody, all my friends knew somebody who was dying, and it was just like, and so how do you integrate this? How do you shift the narrative as Black people? Because we don't know that, I don't even think we realize that the discussions we're having, a lot of folks outside of our race are not having those same discussions.
You're 100% right. And again, that's because we are also somewhat segregated ourselves. So if you're Black, it's likely that your network is 88% Black. So we don't know that white people aren't seeing these things. It might be a shock to some Black people to say, how is it that white people have never seen these things? How do they not know? Because they're not seeing it, because our social media networks it's literally not even crossing their timeline at all. Actually, it's funny. I had to tell a white friend of mine recently who's just now opening his eyes to all this. He keeps sending me all these images, and I'm like, I don't need to see these images. I've been looking at these images for years, bro. You just now are starting. Your social media is just now becoming desegregated. So now and I said, don't send me these things. Send these things to your white friends who don't see these things. You're speaking to the choir. Why are you sending me these things? You need to be sending it to your other friends. And to be honest, when I realized how segregated our networks were, it made me just a little teeny tiny bit more patient. Because I said, you know what? Before I pop off at at another person or another white person for not knowing or not understanding. Let me go through their friend list. Okay, now I understand. And encourage them to integrate their life. Encourage them to follow Black activists, follow Black authors, follow Black speakers, follow Black journalists, and just start to read our stories, read other authors, read Maya Angelou, read Toni Morrison, read James Baldwin, that that they don't know exist. And
we're forced, because Black people are kind of forced to take in white culture in order to integrate.
We're forced to take in their culture, but they pick and choose what parts of our culture that they want. Mm-hmm. It's very easy to cherry pick. Ooh, I like that. Ooh, but I don't like these. I like this, but I don't like this. And yeah, I think it's important for us to ask our friends to share things. Like for Black people, it's important for our mental health. Like there are some days where we don't want to see anything, right? I think it's important to maybe share that with your friends and let them know, especially your white friends. I have to tell my white friends again, don't send me anything. That's not for me to see. That's not for me. I already know what happens. I believe every single story that I see that a Black person posts. Share it with all of your white followers. Yeah, that's what they need to do.
And and Melissa, why? Because I have white friends who have told me they literally don't talk about race. They could go on weeks and never talk about it. Whereas with my Black friends, a lot of us, we talk about it almost every day. Could you explain that phenomenon? Because for a lot of Black people and people of color, it blows our mind that you could go that long and it not even cross your mind.
Well, we've been socialized our whole lives to believe that if you're white, you're the default, that like race, almost like you don't have a race. There's only race when it's someone other than you. So your life, you're living in sort of a bubble where you don't see it, you don't hear it, you don't feel it. And a lot of white people don't understand that they have a role in anti-racism. It's like one of the things I always say is that, in the feminist movement, we need men to be speaking up to men, right? So it's the same thing. The power structure is in white America. So if white America isn't helping to dismantle systemic racism, then how's it going to get dismantled? I mean, there has to be some give. So, it just makes logical sense that white people, racism is a white people problem.
Yeah.
Right? To correct, right? It's not, we don't experience it, we don't live it, but we perpetuate it. And we perpetuate it when we do nothing. So I'm so grateful that we have all these white people paying attention. I mean, horrible that that it took someone's public murder by 4 police officers, state-sanctioned murder on film for them to see it. We have their attention now. And what I'm going to say is that don't go away. Don't disappear again. I mean, we saw people paying attention after our Starbucks video went viral. And then we had a good following of people sticking with us, but not like we have now.
Yeah.
People are paying attention. Don't go away. Stick with us. Learn with us. Desegregate that conversation with us. Speak up in your white spaces. If you don't interrupt that racism in your white space, you're perpetuating it. You're co-signing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I want everybody to tag a friend and share this video because it's important that we have this discussion, because that George Floyd video, first of all, it was traumatic. And I watched it and when I closed my eyes, I know I've been slightly traumatized when I close my eyes and I still see it. And that image of that officer, David Chauvin, with his knee on George Floyd's neck, I mean, that is the image that most of us will never forget. Yesterday on Real Talk, we had law enforcement on here, and law enforcement people from all races from all across the country spoke out against this, and it triggered them as well. And so how important is it, Michelle, that we use this moment, and how do we, as Black people, sort of bring people into the fold gently without, because there's a lot of rage and anger there too, without but keeping the attention, as Melissa mentioned, keeping the attention and gently bringing people in, because it's a lot for them to have the shade lifted and to be traumatized and brought into the trauma.
Right. Yeah, I didn't watch the video. I won't watch it. That was literally my biggest fear. Yeah, my biggest fear in Starbucks was that I was going to see something that I couldn't unsee for the rest of my life. So I didn't watch that. I mean, I didn't even watch Amistad. I didn't watch 12 Years a Slave. I was like, I'm not watching any of that stuff. To me, that is for the white people to see, for them to like wake up and say, oh my God, this is terrible. Let me do something about it. I think we need to be really careful about our mental health. I think we need to take days for ourselves. I think that when it comes to being gentle with our friends, Melissa and I were just talking about this before this call, is that how do you talk about race amongst your friends? And I've made it pretty clear to the friends close to me that, you know, it'll deepen our friendship if I know that you care about what could potentially happen to me and you're willing to post something about it. If I know that you're talking to your friends and your family, that's you know, I can hold on to this friendship. But if I can't talk about these things openly with you, then this is just going to be a surface level connection. I wouldn't even go as deep as friendship. And I've been very clear about that with my friends for the past couple of years. And some have fell off. Some have stayed on. And I think that Black people need to be ready to potentially lose some friends once they start having these conversations, because it's going to be very revealing to you who really sees you and who doesn't. But that's going to be up to you to decide whether or not you are ready to have that conversation. It's a conversation that I felt I probably shied away from because I knew deep down that that was going to happen. And it did. It did. Yeah. But I was shocked at who it was. And I was shocked at who stayed on with me. But for our safety, I think it's really important that if we are going to be friends with white people, they need to be the type of white people that we can have these conversations with. Because if we can't talk about race, then how can we really trust you? If something goes down that's racist, do I know that you can recognize it for what it is and be there for me? We posted a video on our story on our pages the other day about this very young white girl, couldn't have been more than 13 years old, stood in front of a Black boy at a protest because she understood at a young age what white privilege was, and that she was in less danger than this, and a much bigger Black kid, mind you, was behind her. That's the kind of friendship that we need. That's the kind of solidarity that we need from our white friends if we're going to move forward in friendship after this. I don't think that we can afford to accept anything less.
Yeah. And so, and you know, Melissa, on the other hand, because you have lots of people wondering how they can help. Like, so we have to do on one side, you have, as a Black person, you try to bring somebody in because maybe they're oblivious and you're traumatized, you're dealing with this. But as a white person, maybe you see all the trauma and you want to help and you want your friends to know that you're there for them. How do you do that without doing that trigger thing?
I have had so many questions in the past week. I mean, I always have questions from white people, but I've had so many questions, particularly the last couple of days. I don't know what to say. What should I do? Should I change my profile photo to Black, the Black square? What should I say to my Black friends? They're nervous and they don't know what to say. And that's because they've never had these conversations. They haven't educated themselves. They haven't thought about what their role is in anti-racism. So what we tell them is that if you want your questions answered, you can come. We're on social media. You come to our page. We're posting all these things all the time as to what you can do. I had friends today say, oh, you know, what can I read? Tell me the one thing to read right now. And I gave them something, but I also thought, okay, you can go to my page because every single day I've been posting on Instagram every single day, at least 3 things, a specific action you can take right now in your daily life. I've been amplifying the voices of people of color in our networks, and something that you can read or watch or listen to learn. So it's all those resources are there. We think of ourselves at P2P as sort of like a portal, right? We make it easy. I mean, I don't want to say anti-racism for dummies, but like, you're not dummies, you're wonderful. But come to our place, you come to our page, and it'll be that way for you to enter into the into the work and into the conversation.
Yeah. And I want to take a question because this is an interesting question from our audience, and I'll put it up here. Lenka Zivkovic, she says, how is human race separating by colors? That should be abolished. I think that is racist to start with. But can you talk about race as a social construct? Because, yeah, I mean, we're underneath all the genetics, we're pretty much the same. But if the social contract, can you talk about this? Because people always say this to me. Mm-hmm. Well, you know, we should abolish race and all this stuff. And first of all, Black people get pissed when you say that. I just want to put that out there, Lenka. I'm just going to tell you, sis, and this is out of love. This is a safe space. Share this with your friends. Explain this phenomenon, y'all. It's an excellent question, and people. I'm not. I just want you to know, people get upset about that question. And don't apologize, but I want you to understand why. Go right ahead, ladies.
This is why one of the biggest resources that we tell people to listen to is the Seen on Radio, Seeing White podcast series. It explains how race was even created. And yes, it is racist to start with, but that was literally the intention of it. Was it Prince or King Henry from Portugal back in like the 1400s? I'm gonna really like simplify this. I'm gonna sound like I'm a 4-year-old talking about this, but he was basically jealous. He was jealous. He was butthurt. He was jealous because one of his servants came back after traveling the world, and his servant came back and said, "The most peaceful people that I saw were in sub-Saharan Africa." And this king or this prince was so upset by this and so jealous by this that he started literally spreading racist rhetoric to the elite in Europe about sub-Saharan Africans, because up until that time, white people were enslaving each other. And then that narrative started to kind of shift, and the focus started to kind of come, down south towards us. So it is absolutely a racist start, but it's strategic. It is on purpose. That podcast, again, the Seen on Radio, Seeing White podcast, really breaks down how America took that narrative and they went far with it, and purposefully, strategically tried to really divide those racial lines for power and control and for wealth. And so you can't, unfortunately, there's been so much purposeful manipulation and mind control and brainwashing to say that now to take away race, it's almost impossible. Because if you can't see my color, you can't see what's done to me because of my color. I need you to see me. I need you to see that my skin is Black. So if something goes down, you can say, that's happening to her because she's Black. If you can't see that, then you can't help me. You can't be part of the solution.
And that's and Lenka, and I appreciate your question so much, because that is a question that comes up repeatedly. And I appreciate your courage and posting that. And please know, this is a safe space. This is your chance to ask all those questions you always wanted to ask it now. You know what I mean?
Another resource for Lenka. If she doesn't listen to podcasts, this is the other one I always recommend. There's a book called Stamped by Jason Reynolds. It's an adaptation of Stamped from the Beginning, which is a book by Ibram Kendi, who is a scholar, one of the foremost scholars at the Anti-Racism Center at American University. But Jason Reynolds, who is a young adult author he writes everything, but he adapted that book with Ibram Kendi, and it is you can listen to it on Audible. I listen to it on Audible. He reads it. It's amazing. And it gives you the whole overview of how race, that concept, that social construct of race came about. And it takes you all the way through the history of the United States right up until today.
Yeah.
Stamped.
Not stamped from the beginning.
Stamped.
Stamped.
And I will write that down so you guys Stamped.
Jason Reynolds. It's a great resource.
Reynolds. And I'll put that up here so you guys can see it. And this is a conversation that I think that is necessary, especially now. When you view the civil unrest, and all of this is because there's this disconnect. Like, people don't understand why there's so much anger. And I talked to a lot of young people over the past few days, And they are enraged in large part because a lot of them were like 11, 10, 11, 12, 13 when Trayvon Martin was killed. And so when they were really coming of age and he was so close to their age, they got this fear before they even really knew what it was. And I think white kids, black kids, everybody started to see it. And so kids of that age, that's why they're kind of working together, I guess, in some ways. But it's like they see this and they're triggered by it. And they've been triggered because of all the videos. And so how do we bring this discussion and talk about it, not just across races, but also across ages? And, you know, and we really have this this reckoning that we've been needing to have for generations. Because it gotta be bigger. We having a small conversation, but we needed to ripple. So we all are having these conversations.
I can add something about parenting. And I think one of the things we always say is that we know that you were not raised anti-racist. None of us, white people, were raised anti-racist. But now that you know you have the choice to raise your children anti-racist, educate yourself and to do that. First of all, make sure that the books you have in your house, if you have small children, babies, toddlers, and all the way up, there are different voices, different faces. There is a great resource, and I can't tell you what it is off the top of my head, but it is on our page that tells you like the top, 100 books for different ages that you can do to desegregate your library at home. So you have to start really, really young with your children and make sure. I mean, I don't know about both of you. Actually, I probably do. Is that I'm sure all your books when you were growing up were probably little white characters and white authors, just like mine were. So that's really, really important. There's also a great group that we've worked with before that does a lot of parenting work called Embrace Race. It's a couple, and they talk about raising anti-racist kids. So those are a couple of parenting resources for people with younger children.
Yeah, and I interviewed Dr. Ibram Kendi, and we talked about what being an anti-racist is. Could you talk about that? And Michelle, I'll just toss it to you because people think that they always say, I'm not racist. I'm not racist. I don't see race and all this kind of stuff. And I had to even check myself because I had to say, wow, am I a tool? You know what I'm saying? Like, am I like pushing a racist agenda because you grew up in a society where you're taught to think certain things? So could you both kind of talk about this idea of anti-racism, a new word for a lot of people?
I mean, like you said, you have to even check yourself. I had to do that work for years, Cherri. I mean, I grew up in a white town, but my parents are from Ghana. So coming to this country, not understanding systemic oppression, wanting to have the best schools, you move your family to the white neighborhood, and I absorbed the racist messages that the white people around me absorbed. And I tried to shield myself from that as much as I could by holding on to my African identity because I understood what white Americans thought about Black Americans, and I didn't want to be associated with that. And so what that did when you're trying to survive in that type of environment where you're constantly exposed to racism on a pretty regular basis, it's a survival tactic to try and disassociate. And I started to even have some racial biases about Black Americans myself. Even me as Black, I had to be somewhat actively anti-racist. I had to go out and seek books, seek knowledge, educate myself on purpose. I have friends who would say to me, I'm not racist, but in the same breath will say, well, Michelle, and you're not really like them. That is not being anti-racist. You just think you're not racist, but you're not taking intentional steps and actions to educate yourself about systemic oppression. Are you donating to things? Are you amplifying Black voices? Are you teaching your children about what's going on in this country? Are you making sure that you're voting for the right people? Are you putting pressure on your local police, and the people that you vote for? I mean, all of these things matter when it comes to being actively anti-racist, because if you're not actively anti-racist, there are probably some things that you are missing that are falling through the cracks around you that you are letting happen.
Yeah. But you know what? When I hear that, when I read, I was like, Wow, like and even within communities of color, there could be racism within there because certain people think they're this, well, that type of black, or that's this type of, and some of the same beliefs that we accuse white people of having, black people have about their own race. And so you really do have to check yourself, no matter what race you are, and know that you could have beliefs within yourself. And so, yeah, and so any comments, Melissa, on the issue of anti-racism, because it in some ways this sounds like a lot, and it sounds like, why not just stay in the bubble,
It sounds like a lot, but it actually isn't. It's just integrating it into your life in a mindful way, with some humility and some curiosity and a really a sincere desire to do better. And so let's go back to that analogy of like, okay, so your husband or your boyfriend might say, well, I'm not sexist. Okay, but when his friends, say something around their friends and he doesn't say anything, he's letting it happen. He's co-signing. So you would not dare let him say he's a feminist. You're only a feminist. A man is only a feminist when they are taking action in their everyday life, in that they're amplifying the voices of women, and that they're speaking up among men, and that they're educating themselves. The same concept. So if you think of it that way, for all the women out there with us, think of it that just not being racist is just letting it happen and benefiting from it. So how is that making anything better? How is that using the privilege that you were born with by no fault of your own? It's not your fault you were born in certain skin, but you have privilege in this country because you were born with white skin. That's just a fact. So unless you're doing something, then you're allowing it to happen and benefiting from it. And to me, that's the difference between being just not racist or anti-racist. You have to be actively against it.
Yeah. And that issue of white silence, I've seen the sign, white silence equals violence, right?
Yeah.
And I think that was what a lot of white people were doing for a long time. They were like, well, I'm not racist. And if they had friends that said racist jokes, they just wouldn't say anything. But then they talk to you and be like, girl, you my girl. He's just crazy. But I mean, so why now? Like now we feel like, now it seems like that part of it is shifting, and that there's this inner white fight. I call it the inner white fight. Like it's like we're not, I mean, I feel like black people kind of stepping back and it's like an inner white fight. Melissa, is there an inner white fight? And Michelle, do you view it this way too?
Yeah, there is. And you know what? Guess what? We need people to do the labor because you shouldn't have to do the labor. Like we said, is that racism is a problem that exists within white America. So those people that are on that path to anti-racism, and one of the things we always say is, we don't like to say, we don't say at all, you're an ally, you're woke, you're an advocate, any of that, because those are destinations. So what we say is, do you show up, or will you show up? So because showing up is something, it's active. It's not performative. It's not like, oh, I'm an ally, now I can just shut up. It is an active thing that you do in your life. So when somebody does something, we say, oh, look, this person shows up. So yeah, let us, that's where the work has to be done within white people, inside of themselves, and with each other. So yeah, I'm all for that. I'm all for that white fighting.
That's a white fight. Okay.
Yeah,
this whole election cycle has been a white fight. And give us some examples, Michelle, of the showing up thing. How do we know if somebody showed up for us?
Well, they'll be talking to you and you'll be able to actually have an intellectual conversation with them. I was talking to a friend the other day and I was like, oh, you've been reading. Because you're saying things that I can actually have a legitimate conversation with you. It's important that, like, when you show up, you can tell because someone can admit their faults. You can tell because someone can admit that, you know what, I have biases. And I'm really working hard to dismantle them. You can tell someone shows up because maybe they quote a book, or they're talk about a book that they've been reading, or talk about something that, a situation where they, called someone out at a party or whatnot. A friend of mine just did that recently. It was all white people. Someone made a racist joke, and she called them out, and she said it got really awkward. Everyone got silent, but she said, "I don't care. This is ridiculous. Like, you're only saying this because there's no Black people in the room right now." To be honest, I would like to hear those stories from my white friends. I love those stories. Gas me up. I have friends that come to me and admit biases that they have. And you know, like white friends, like, Michelle, you know what? I gotta be honest with you. Something happened the other day, and I said, but at least you're talking about it and you recognize that it's an issue and it's a problem. And we all have to do that. We all have biases. If I see a white guy walking down the street who's bald with tattoos, I get worried that he might be in the KKK. That's a bias that I have, straight up. And to be honest, if you don't mind, I want to address one comment that I see in here. I don't want to call out the person's name. Someone specifically said in this that African men hate us Black women. And again, that's coming from another Black woman. And that's a bias. That is a bias that you have that you need to address within yourself. Have you ever been to Africa? Oh my God, they love us. You know what I mean? Like, you may have had a couple bad experiences, but that is just not true. That is lumping literally millions of people together to say that, you know what I mean? Like, you have to be able to address that. And we all have biases. That's the point. Not just white people, not just Black people, Asian people, Indian people. I mean, everybody. And you have to be able to do that work to see the humanity in other people and understand that we all think this way. Really, because of white supremacy.
Yes.
Like, the colorism that we have in our community comes from white supremacy. Like, the tension between Africans and Black Americans is because of white supremacy and the messages that we receive about one another. I mean, the images, you know, I'm sorry to all the white bald men that are probably giving dirty looks to over the years, but because that's the image that I see on TV, that I think that you're a skinhead. It's the work that we have to do within each other every single day, that we make sure that we are not unintentionally hurting one another. We have to do that work.
And I got a point. Angie Bird had this question. Do you believe that Black people can be racist? And I hear white people always say to me, like, especially because I cover race and I cover issues of race, I get called racist by white people all the time. You're racist. You're doing some racist stuff. And can you talk about this phenomenon of, because I do think that Black people can have racist ideas or promoting racist structures or something. But why do you think that, and because we call that's racist. Could you talk about that a little bit? Because can Black people be racist?
Okay, I'm going to give that a no. And I'm going to say why. There's a difference between prejudice and racism. There are differences, and I'm not going to get into all the details here, but what I'm going to say is that word racist and racism is thrown, let me put my thing on, is thrown around and everything's lumped into that. But racism is a combination of history and institutions that form that underlie all of our structures, and that so in our country, our institutions were built on racism, and so racism is the structure. The way you act is different. So no, Black people can't be racist in America because in America was built for white people. Michelle, you want to?
Yeah, because like I can have racist thoughts all day long, but nothing that I do can impact your life as a white person or anyone else the way that your actions can impact my life, because I don't have that power. I don't have that structural power behind me to say that, you know, Stacey, you're going to live in this neighborhood only. But white people have the power behind their racist thoughts and actions. I mean, yeah, I can do racist things to someone, but again, it's not going to impact your life, you know, in the long run. I mean, we have racism in healthcare, in education, housing, banking. I mean, we have racism everywhere. And who does it impact?
Yeah, negatively, yeah.
So just like Melissa said, I think we need to be really kind of careful with that word. Someone said racism is about power. You're 100% right, W.T. Martin. It's about power. We just don't have that power. Yeah, I can have racist thoughts about you, but you could just go on about your day, and it's not going to really impact where you live or where you go to school or how much money you make, or how much or how great the healthcare you receive is. So.
Yeah. And people are trying to root that out. And I will tell you how to be an anti-racist. When I read that, I was like, I felt some kind of way, because I realized that growing up in a white supremacist society, you're taught certain things. Certain things are better than other things.
Yeah.
That can be racist. That's a racist way of believing. And it could be negative towards you. And colorism, racism, all those things. And so how do we separate ourselves from this? Because we realize, I will tell y'all one thing about that George Floyd image. Everybody agreed this was wrong. Like, this, putting your knee on someone's neck this way was wrong. And you see the white guy and the black man and so people I think they kind of snapped out of it. Because it was so egregious, we all agreed. But how do we say, okay, I'm snapped out of it? How do you sort of peel back the layers and really deal with the underlying issue that is racism and try to separate yourself from it, and at least identify when you're doing something that may fall in those categories?
Can I?
Yeah.
I was just going to add something about that image, because that image that we're all seeing, just because I think it's really important that people understand is that and then when you see police joining in with kneeling, and the protesters are marching with the protesters, and we see these feel good videos, well, that's wonderful. I appreciate that. But that doesn't mean that everything's better, because the fact is that our policing system is built to brutalize and kill black and brown men and women. And just because I just was speaking with someone right before this who said, I just spoke to a lot of my cop friends who said, yeah, we all agree and we all say publicly that was an execution, but will those 4 cops get prosecuted? Probably not. And I don't want to say that because I want to believe that they will, but there are a lot of things in place in our systems of policing that make that really hard to do. And that's where the work is. The work is getting involved in helping to dismantle those systems. So sorry, went on a rant.
No, I think that's perfect, because you have to identify it. And I think we gotta shift a little bit to this Amy Cooper situation. We got to talk about that, y'all. Ladies. When it was so, first of all, your reaction to the Amy Cooper, and it was on video, another video.
My reaction. I wish I had been there.
Yes. If you were there for that one.
Woo! I wish I'd been there. I'd be like, Amy, let me tell you what's happening right now within yourself, Amy. Okay. She is so wildly racist, and it really irks me that people still think that because you're a liberal progressive, apparently people found out that she was a liberal, as if that matters, that it was even more shocking that she could have been racist. Listen, man, that's why back to your comment about, how can we separate ourselves? We can't separate ourselves. You can't just label yourself a liberal progressive and think that you don't have to do any work. Like, you don't have to read a book like What's on Melissa's Shelf, Me and White Supremacy. You don't have to read White Fragility. You don't have to do any of these things. What happened with Amy Cooper is, the exact same thing that happened in Starbucks. The woman used her whiteness to remove a black person from her space. She knew what she was doing. She knew it was racist. She went along with it anyways. And she, some people that forgive her, I've been trying to find the compassion in my body, and I just can't, because she knew exactly what could happen to that man if the cops came. Mm-hmm. And I want to encourage white people. I'm sure her friends never thought that Amy Cooper was racist. They probably wouldn't think that. They probably still don't think Amy Cooper is racist. That is why it's so important to have these discussions and educate yourself so you can see it within yourself. So when you see other white people acting in a certain way, you can say, you're actually acting in a racist way. I understand that because I've been educating myself. And that's why it's so important to talk to your friends and talk to your family. And talk to the people around you. I have a white friend who had a friend for a couple years. They're fellow teachers. She's been on this path of anti-racism. And because her and this girl get along so well, she just assumed that her friend wasn't racist. Until she brought up, hey, our school's really white. We should really try to diversify the students. And her friend said to her, well, it's white and we like it that way. And her friend was like, oh my God, I can't believe how racist you are. Like, you don't know really who your friends are until you have these discussions. So I don't give Amy Cooper a pass. And this just goes to show white women, you need to be having talks with all the people in your life because you don't really know what is in the hearts and minds of the people around you until you draw it out.
Yeah. And the thing is, nowadays, you could lose your job. Her life is disrupted based on that one moment of, I don't know her. So I'm like, were you insane in that moment?
That's the thing.
She looked like something was there. You know what I mean? Like she was just pissed. And so she just went in a way. And I was like, girl, you lost your job over this.
And her dog. And her dog. They took her dog. This is what, I'm just going to use this term. She weaponized her whiteness, and she knew that she knew her whiteness was a weapon when she got on that phone and she said, I'm going to tell them a black man or she said African-American man. I don't know why maybe she thought that was being politically correct, but she used it as a weapon knowingly. She did. And that's that. And that's the first thing I want to say. Second thing I want to say is the Amy Coopers of the world end up with the George Floyds of the world because they escalate very quickly.
Yeah.
So don't call the police.
Don't call the police.
If you think in that moment, when you feel whatever you feel, unconsciously threatened, you think if this person were white, would I call the police?
Because a barista in Starbucks admitted she wouldn't have called the cops if they were white. She admitted that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great barometer. Ask yourself, if this person was white, would you do the same thing? And if the answer is no, then that you're probably got a racist tendency there. Could be a racist action you're taking.
Mm-hmm.
You would do something different if the person was not black or was not whatever other race. That's a good barometer because people call the police. And I have to tell you, it was another video. I'm not sure if you ladies saw this video, but it was like a tenant in an office building, white guy.
Yes.
To the gym.
Yes.
With the young black men who are work in the office, have an office there too. And he tries to call the police, threatens to call the police on them as well, asking them why are they there? How do they belong there? I mean, this whole policing, because I feel like black people don't necessarily do that. We don't always ask you, why are you here in this room? And black people get kind of offended by that. And so is that another time you ask yourself if they were white? Is that the new question?
Yes. That is definitely a time because he wasn't even that sorry. The way that he apologized, he was like, I should have just let the building handle it. As if he still felt like something should have been done to verify that they should have been there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that I got to put this up. I'm going to put this banner up because ask yourself, if they are white, would you do this thing, make this call or a statement? Because you have to. And I feel there's a little misspelling in there, but y'all get what I'm trying to say here. And because that is a good question. I mean, like, that is the best question I heard. Like, would you do this thing? Because we got to take a minute or so to talk about this whole policing situation. I have a show that I host called Flashpoint, and that was a big topic of discussion. Like, why calling 911 on a black person could end up like George Floyd. Mm-hmm. And that's the fear we have, which is why these conflicts continue to happen. And so just your thoughts on that. And Michelle, how do we handle it? How do we say, you know what, please don't call the police? How do we handle this situation?
I've been trying to think, to be honest. I'm still asking myself that question. I'm still asking, how do we handle that situation? Because we live in a world where we can't necessarily avoid the police. They're coming. They're going to be around no matter what. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've been asking for equality for hundreds of years. It doesn't matter how much we ask, how much we beg, how much we plead. It doesn't matter if we peacefully protest or if we destroy Walnut Street in Philadelphia. Our cries aren't heard. And you know, when this continues, that's when people start to get radical ideas. Like I have a radical idea that maybe Black people should just stop spending their money in the economy for a week and see what happens. Only buy from Black brands for 1 week and see how much people start to care about Black lives. You know, I mean, really, because, you know, our money is very, very valuable. We are big spenders.
Yeah.
You know, I still ask myself what to do. I think what we need to do, while white people are addressing their biases and how they need to dismantle the system that their ancestors built, I think the work that we need to do, again, is still addressing the biases within one another and becoming a stronger community together within us. We need to recognize that we have white supremacist tendencies because of what has been, you know, done to us over the years. And I think that that's where the healing needs to come. I think that we need to talk to one another and heal together so that we can be stronger together. While white people, it's like white people fight racism so we can heal.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, take that break, take that off of us. And so how do we, you know, and Melissa, as we're getting close to wrapping up, but I mean, at this point, we want to take the conversation to the next step. Should white people be having these conversations just among themselves? Because I know a lot of people who have a Black friend or a friend outside of their race, they will come to them for these discussions. And I mean, do you think it's time that isn't the only time you have racial discussion?
Yes, white people should be having these conversations. They should be doing the work. They should be educating themselves and having these conversations. And I think Michelle is very generous with her white friends. And I think that I have some other friends who are also generous with their white friends. But I'm sure she'll tell you how exhausting it is. I'm sure it's exhausting for you. And we have to do it within ourselves. Nobody can do it for us. We have to do it within ourselves because we were socialized our entire lives with it. So until you're able to look inside yourself and really acknowledge your biases and unlearn all those racist narratives you learned, then, you know, we're not going to make that much progress. At least that's the way I feel about it. And, you know, just real quickly about the police is that I want every white person to think about how you grew up thinking of the police. If you grew up thinking that the police, when they showed up, they were there to protect you, like me, if I saw a police officer, I was like, oh, I'm being protected. But that's not what it's like. Michelle will tell you, it's the opposite. It's opposite. If you're Black, the police are not there to protect you. So, and that's because of the system. And I'm not saying all cops are bad. And I'm not saying, you know, I'm not calling out every single police officer, but it's systemic.
Yeah. So I want us to get real with our friends outside of our race. Like, I really think in order for us to become like true friends and true allies, we got to get real. Like, we can't be, and I say this, I mean, and you know, Michelle, how do we as Black people not get, because you mentioned pop off. You said the word that I love, pop off. How do we, because we gotta not be triggered all the time in order for us to get closer. Because sometimes, you know, it's a painful crossing of the threshold so that you can become true friends and get past that hump, that superficiality, which means race has to become a part of the discussion. How do we do that without popping off?
I read White Fragility and I was like, oh my God, I get it now. So when someone's going through something and I can see something happening, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm watching the fragility take over. I'm watching them have all these these feelings bubble up, and it's really interesting to see it now. Beforehand, I would probably think that you're just a racist, and now I'm like, you're grappling with just understanding your whiteness for the first time. You can be 40, 50, 60 years old and have still never thought of yourself as white. So I'm doing reading also. If we're like, we want white people to read about what's going on in our world. Well, we need to read about what goes on in the minds of white people if we're going to have white friends and want to have that deep connection with them and be able to talk with them and call things out and recognize things in them as well. That's if you do want to, have deeper relationships with your friends. It's relationships, no matter what, whether it's romantic or platonic, it's work. Relationships are still work. You still have to put in the time and effort to show a person that you care. So when I read that book, it made me really, really patient, not really, really patient, but it really helped me understand a bit more. I'm going to actually read it again. I'm even going to read Me and White Supremacy, because I think that's another thing that I need to read to understand what goes on in the minds of white people more. And I'm also just a very curious person. But I think that's what and I think, again, we need to start having these conversations with our white friends to find out who is really in our corner and who we can really trust.
Yeah. And I want to throw the last question to you, Melissa. How do you show up? How can, this is a tough time for people of all races, but specifically for Black people, as we see these, just so much happening within our community and so many mixed feelings. How can white people show up for their friends and the people that they love who are not white?
Yeah, they can show up by we make it real simple. We say three things: learning, educating yourself, speaking up in your everyday life, which means in your white spaces, and amplifying the voices of people of color. Three things: learn, speak up, amplify. Those are all ways that you can show up. And
what does amplify mean? Just so y'all know in here, just in case you have that question, what does amplify?
So amplify Black voices, because when you think about our Starbucks situation, is that I amplified Michelle's voice into my white network, and then people paid attention to it. So amplify. Don't speak for a person of color. It's not your job to advocate or speak for a person of color. Let them speak for themselves, but pass the mic to them. Open up your space. Reshare the content on your social media. And, take a step back. We white people tend to overtalk a lot, including me.
This was absolutely a beautiful conversation. Let me just read some of the comments to you guys. It says, if they talk about if you're true friends, you'll have these discussions. Thank you. Lenka, thank you for your question, love. She says, thank you. It was my pleasure to hear. Very interesting conversation. I learned from you. And she's going to get those books. And could you mention the books again for folks? And I will make sure I put a link here. I know Stamped was one of them. And then you mentioned White Fragility, and what other books?
Me and White Supremacy.
Me and White Supremacy. So I will put the books here. You guys, please tag a friend and share this video. I know today was Blackout Tuesday. So hopefully when people get back on social, they'll check this out. I want to say, check out Michelle and Melissa at their organization, From Privilege to Progress. I have the handle here. And tell us, what are you guys doing with From Privilege to Progress? It's coming up so people can be in anticipation.
Well, we started a Coffee Live series. It's super exciting. Our first Coffee Live series, Melissa did one with Jamila Jamil. I did one with Ilana Glazer. We have them coming up with Rayson Bowden. He was the Olympic medalist who took a knee, and America lost their minds on him. He's an amazing kid. Kaja Fit. We did one with Jay Hardwick, which is Amari Hardwick's wife. And so we have these I did one today with Mo Collins. And so they're really interesting conversations. They're super, super fun. So come to our IG page and we will announce them as they come.
Wonderful. And I think I popped into one of your conversations there. And so I want to say thank you so much, Melissa DePino, Michelle, Saahene. Thank you so much. And good luck with From Privilege to Progress. I think the work that you're doing is so timely and so necessary. And it's becoming more and more necessary every single day.
Thanks, Cherri. It's great to see you again.
Thank you so much, guys. And ladies, I appreciate both of them for being here on Real Talk with Cherri. Please tag a friend and share this video and let folks know. I mean, this was Blackout Tuesday, but we wanted to have this discussion because it's time to talk about race, y'all. And it can't just be us preaching to the choir or talking amongst ourselves. Let's desegregate our friend list. I know I need to do some work. Let's all do that work, bring in friends of different races, have these conversations, educate ourselves. There was a lot of books mentioned, Me and White Supremacy, White Fragility, and Stamped. I will put links to Amazon on those 3 books on this page. And thank you again. Follow Priv to Prague online. And on Thursday, guess what we'll be doing? Thursday at 8 o'clock, we'll be talking to some youth. We'll try our best to wrap our minds around why some of this looting is happening, why there's so much rage within our next generation. We'll talk about the protests, we'll talk about how youth feel, and we'll hear it from their mouths. So I can't wait for this conversation to give them a space to really talk about what's happening and how they see the world, because Generation Z is coming up, y'all. And we have to do something to make space for them. So I'm Cherri Gregg, and this has been Real Talk with Cherri. I'll see you on Thursday at 8 o'clock. Real Talk airs here live on Facebook and on YouTube every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at either 7:30 or 8 o'clock. Stay well and be safe. And thank you guys for tuning in. Please tag a friend and share this video. Have a great night.